Welcome back to Neuro and Beyond with Simon
and Angela.
And this week we're going to be talking about gut feeling, trusting your judgment. It wasn't what we were going to talk about. One thing that Angela and I do is we send ideas to each other, usually in the form of GIFs or GIFs. Is it GIFs or GIFs? That's what it means. And we were going to talk about guilt and shame when it comes to neurodiversity and mental health. But one thing that we've both noticed this week is that there's roadblocks being put up, and when they start appearing, I think I've certainly started doing since speaking with Angela, is looking at why are these roadblocks presenting themselves. And I don't mean, there's not a literal roadblock stopping me driving the car to pick up Angela, but there's something happening inside that's going, I don't want to do it, or that doesn't feel right. And so that led us on to gut feeling, trusting your gut. What is it and why? Why don't we listen to it? And so, as in the car this morning, as I picked Angela up, we were sort of talking about this and subsequent conversations over a coffee about what is it and how does it present, and have we got to a point in life or in our evolution that we no longer listen to our gut. We don't trust gut. We've got all these sayings, your gut feeling, listen to your gut. What's your gut telling you? And just a little bit of reading this week is, talking about the vagus nerve and how that's connected between brain and stomach, and how with neurodivergency there can be, or people with neurodivergency can have stomach problems, and which extends to, then onto skin problems, and it's quite a common thing, which I hadn't realised. And that I've spent a long time, many times in my life, of just staying quiet, whereas my gut has been going bubbling away, going, this isn't right, something, you've got to say something, go on. But because of low self-esteem, or because of my experiences with not realising at the time neurodivergency, I kept it quiet, and invariably the end result would be, oh, I wish I'd said something, why didn't I say something? So how does that, when we start talking about, one of the things you mentioned there was about chakras and how, how they work. I don't know enough about them. I've only heard of them. So how do you, when we start talking about gut feeling, how does that come across with you? What sort of, what's your take on it?
Yeah, I feel like it's really interesting that with neurodivergence, a lot of neurodivergent individuals have those gut feelings strongly, and they're can be more on the extreme side. And those gut feelings, rather than be treated as something that produce anxiety or whatever, is it a pattern, and is it a sensory, like the sixth sense, giving you that strong instinct to take a different route, a different path? So when I feel that I'm doing something or getting those roadblocks in, it's resistance. I can recognise it now as resistance, and it's like my whole body feels like fingers down a blackboard. It's that toe curling energy that kind of envelops me, and I think, okay, I've got resistance to this.
And is that a real physical feeling?
Yeah, real physical. There's a big resistance. Why am I resisting this? Am I resisting it because it's not right and it won't serve my higher good? Or am I resisting it because I don't want to face a fear of mine that I need to work through? So they're kind of the two reasons that I go to try and work it out. So when we got our, that little clip you sent, let's talk about this, and I thought, yeah, that's great, let's talk about this. At that time, for both of us, we were both probably working through our own I don't want to use the word issues, but our own learning opportunities, and then we work through them. And so there's no need for us to talk about them at this time now. We need to talk about something else, because it's not just about us delivering to an audience, it's about us serving us.
Yeah.
You and me, and we both get very different but also very aligned learning from the whole process, everything. It's not just about the 30 minutes to an hour that we talk about and the audience. It's completely holistic.
Yeah, and I think it's that kind of that organic conversation that we have. It's like we start at point A, and we got then B, C, D, E, and then it branches off, and then we end up at this completely different place, which I had no idea that we were going to get to. And that bit you were sort of mentioning about how it presents, or how we get this gut feeling. Mine particularly presents around people. I call it my bullshit meter.
Yeah.
It's a sixth sense, or however you want to describe it, is that I can meet somebody and in an instant know whether I'm going to get on with them or not. There's some sort of, whether it's some micro movements in the face, in their features, if it's their body language, if it's the words they're using, their tones, whatever it is, whether it's a combination of all of the above. All of it happens really quickly, and in that one instant, I go, no, I'm getting a bad vibe off of this person, and I don't think I'm going to be able to connect with them.
Yeah.
And it's not to say I haven't been proven wrong yet, and it's that confirmation, it's that constant confirmation of, oh no, you're right. And you could argue, well, maybe you're not getting to know them better, so you're missing an opportunity, but I say no, because those people who I have given an opportunity to have turned out to be
exactly what you thought.
Exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
And that's not just from my experience, that's from the people closest to me going, you're right about them.
Yeah, and that sensitivity plays out then as a skill. I see that as an absolute aptitude
100%.
and a skill that should not be taken as, other people say, well, maybe, and they try and dumb it down.
I should have got a job in recruitment.
And I learned sort of from a spiritual, energetic perspective is learning when people were lying to me, because I would have this feeling that the energy. So just like I said about the energy being like fingers down a blackboard, the energy of somebody lying to me, they would give off, and I would have if I did, I'd do that.
Yeah.
And then I
like
question, I would question, why have I felt like that? So I would go to my higher self, spirit guide, or whatever you want to say, and say, is that right? Is this person lying to me? And I think on a number of occasions, spirit said, wait, and then later on down the line, something has popped up that has proven that person lied to me at that point in that situation. So that has helped me learn what you described there as an innate skill within neurodivergence, is that reading of people. I learned that. So it's a great skill. Yeah,
and I don't think it's uncommon amongst neurodivergence.
No.
I think there is something, for me, it presents in my stomach, and it can often, I suppose you could confuse it with, described as butterflies, or nervousness or anxiety, but it starts here, and and I have to have that connection. I've got to wait for it to get here, and it's not just going to go, oh yes, it's because of this. I have to mentally explore it, which is a new phenomenon for me, because it was just like, I just trust my gut. I know my gut's right. But not why. What is it? What is this feeling? What am I experiencing now? And like this week, as we talked about the subjects that we were going to talk about, and how today, or through the course of the week, we've had these roadblocks pop up, rather than just forcing our way through it, and we'll do it anyway, and maybe it wouldn't be a great episode. I mean, there's this sort of thing. But we could have forced our way through it.
Yeah.
But I think what's come out of it is that you and I have had a really good conversation about why one, you were actually feeling the same way as I was, which I think is really interesting, that we're both having that kind of, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
But also why, what is it? And as it turns out, what a brilliant conversation to have is like, well, trust your gut. Why do we trust our gut?
Yeah.
Why are these roadblocks appearing? Let's look at it.
Yeah.
Let's look at where we are in terms of our conversations that we're having. Who could this benefit? Because as you said, that's ultimately what we're doing this for. We want this to be for the benefit of others who might be in similar situations, either struggling with their mental health or neurodivergent or both is often the case. And understand that you can't go through life ignoring these warnings, because they are warnings. It's like, literally is like an amber light going.
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you go into any, manufacturing area, they have amber lights flashing, warning. Or the road, on the roads, you've got the diggers and the snow plows, amber lights, warning. And there's a reason that we have those.
Yeah.
And I think what's as we start to talk through these, and we start to go, well, actually, what does it mean? When, something's happening, I don't feel right about this. I either go with it and just go through it and hopefully come out the other side relatively unscathed, or do I listen to what's going on in my body and my mind ultimately, and explore before I have the experience?
Yeah.
And I suppose if you've had that experience, reviewing it, it's like, so why did I do this? What's the lesson for me? Because I think we do go through a lot of things, and we experience a lot of things that might be really negative experiences. And, I'm not trying to gloss it up by saying, well, everything for a reason. As in,
but it kind of is.
But it kind of is. It kind of is.
Yeah.
And I've certainly been guilty myself. That's why I keep hitting the microphone. I've certainly been guilty of feeling sorry for myself through some really negative, dark times in my life. Well, why me? It's not fair. It's like, nobody said life would be fair. That's something I think we all need to understand a little bit. And if you go through something as awful as it might be, that if you can find a lesson for you from it, and I'm not talking about just finding the most negative, dark reason for, well, I'm going to hate everybody forever now. And it's easy to say, I recognise that. But I think when you can sit back and look at, why was that job so? Why did I end up in this position from work?
Yeah.
Why am I repeatedly in this same position?
Yeah.
Different job, different company, same result. Why is that? And then you have to do some real self-exploration as to why am I putting myself in these same situations and coming out in the same place. And I think, I can't remember who it was who said, was it the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
Yeah, and not asking why. And that is the absolute key. You say, ask yourself why, like it's the most natural thing in the world to you, and it is, but it's not the most natural thing to everybody. We go through stages where we're influenced by society, parents, family, where we don't ask questions. We follow the rules.
Yeah.
And it's that question of why that opens the door. That is the absolute key to opening the door. And one way to that I find what we did earlier, Sam and I were talking, and I've forgotten what I was going to say. My brain just gridlocked. I wanted to say something, so I went and had a wee, and then came back in and knew what I was then going to say, and realised that a real key to helping understand the self is to just take time connected to water. So our bodies are 70% water, and the water has the crystalline memory. The water can bring you clarity. So having a pee, having a shower, having a bath, walking in the rain.
But that's why we have water features in our gardens.
Yeah.
That's why we go and sit by the sea when you're feeling overwhelmed. You go sit by a river, sit by a body of water. We have these pictures. We go to sleep listening to rain on your phone, as a method. So there's definitely something in that.
Yeah, it's a good magnifier. It's just one of the ways that somebody might find a resonance with to get their answers. Everybody does it a different way. And you mentioned the chakras earlier. The solar plexus chakra, the gut stuff, is our chakra of power. That's personal power. So when that feeling, we get the butterflies and the nervousness, or physical, it manifests physically in the gut. That's our body trying to say to us, it's questioning our willpower and our personal power and saying, come on, you need to work through what you're doing to block your own power.
Yeah, and I think there's a phrase that springs to mind that I think a lot of us, myself, I can relate to many instances, is that sometimes we take the path of least resistance. And, basically reading into that is, that looks difficult, that's a difficult emotion, that's a difficult memory. Yeah. I'm just going to go around it. I'm going to avoid, I don't want to look at that, I'm going to go around it. And invariably, the biggest growth that I've experienced, and we've spoken about, is the very painful, sometimes awkward, difficult decision to look at it
and go through
it, and come out. And because avoidance doesn't help. It whatever it is you're avoiding will sit there. It stays there. Trauma that I've carried for decades, it's still there. It still sits in my mind. It still comes up in moments of difficulty. And that actually was another conversation we had. Is that when we start talking about those things, it's often, particularly those of us late diagnosed neurodivergence, we've carried all this stuff from childhood, and so we still look at it through childish eyes, through the eyes of a child, and that brings a lot of naivety and childhood emotion into it. Not to demean or diminish it in any way, but when you look at that and when you start to investigate it as an adult, as a grown man now, and I look back at it, I can see it differently, and I can see, actually, do you know what? That has formed or helped me become who I am. And I know it's sometimes difficult to say, but everything for a reason, because, as you say, because it is. I can look back at it and go, well, actually, do you know what? I wouldn't be who I am today. I wouldn't be the husband that I am. I wouldn't be the father I am. I wouldn't be the friend that I am. I wouldn't be the colleague that I am. Yeah. I wouldn't be the co-host that I am if I hadn't experienced all those things.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, I heard something the other day, it's like, if you gave someone the option of, you go through all those things again, or would you just none at all? And surprisingly, a lot of people went, actually, do you know what, I'll stick with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very much a, from a higher perspective, it's our choices that we make before we incarnate to our primary life lessons. And we attract all those situations that bring in the contrast. So the opposite of our life lesson. So if our life lesson is worthiness, to learn worthiness, we attract all the situations that make us feel completely unworthy, completely on the floor with self-esteem over and over and over, so that we can see the opposite of what we're meant to be and who we really are. And it's going through all of those experiences, finding that power within the self of becoming who you truly are. I very much feel of the view now that we don't train ourselves to become something who we weren't before. We become who we already are. Our soul is there.
Yeah.
And it's just how we respond. We learn how we respond to all those situations on this earth. We change our responses.
Yeah. That's really interesting, because there was somebody there's like two trains of thought on, you know, work on your weaknesses, work on what you're not good at. You know, if you're good at something, work on the things around that, work on the things you're not so good at. And I was like, okay, so you can work on being kind of mediocre and everything, or work on that thing that you are really good at and be an expert at that, because maybe that's the thing that you need to be, that's why you're here, is to become the expert in that and be the very best at that, or the best you can be at that. Sorry?
Like Mozart.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, you don't have to be good at everything.
Yeah.
It's you know, we talk about, you know, our children's education, how it's very formulaic. It's just like learn English, math, science to pop out the other end, and then maybe you can choose what you want to do. But it's like, well, what about the children who can't focus on maths, who can't focus on science, who are creative?
Yeah.
What about, and there are an awful lot of them. And I'm not just talking about people who can draw. It's like creative in music, creative in literature itself. And then maybe they can't, you know, put down the story that's up here, but they can express it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think we're really lucky now that we have so many mediums that can be used, that there's certainly more options, but all the while that they're being funneled into this system that wants to make them all identical.
Yeah.
I think we're always going to be in trouble with that.
Yeah.
And I'd be an absolute massive advocate for, you know, changing all of that. I know I've digressed a little bit here, unsurprisingly, but it's really important that you let children know from an early age that, you know, who you are is absolutely wonderful, is perfect. You know, the way that, you know, whatever's going on up here, it's fine, it's right. And I think that the lessons that I've learned, you know, through listening to Gut and or not listening to it and going along with the general flow, is that it won't lead to happiness. If you're avoiding what's going on up here and going on down here, it's going to lead to unhappiness. Because there is a reason that you get the gut feeling, why you've got those thoughts. There's a reason for it. And it's that you need to explore it. And if you can do that as a child, you know, you see how creative kids are. You know, they don't have all this learned behaviour that we as adults in society dump on them. You see how free they are. You see they'll play with any kid. You know, they don't care what colour, religion, what football team you support. It doesn't matter. None of it matters. But that's all layered on afterwards. And you kind of, you know, it's like, trust who you are.
And I think that what many would say now is an upsurge of the mental health spotlight on the population in the Western world is, you know, that there are many aspects to it. There are many extremes. It's like the pendulum swings, but there can never be change within our within the human race without a pendulum swing to the extreme. And it usually swings the other way before it then falls back to balance. And I think this upsurge in us focusing on mental health will force the eventually and gradually the educational system and all our other systems to almost recalibrate and reevaluate to play to all of that you just articulated.
And I think that's the big thing with, like, you know, coming all the way through is one of these threads through diagnosis. You know, why it was so important for me is like getting this diagnosis is because, one, yes, it confirms something that I don't want to say it was different about me. There was a reason that I couldn't fit into this world that I was following, because that's what my friends and family were doing. So, you know, that's what's expected. That's what I've got to try and do. It wasn't right for me, made me ill. But again, the diagnosis means that then I'm also a statistic. And if you look at the statistics, say that after a couple of drinks, look at the statistics now, that they're saying at least 20% of the population is neurodivergent. That's a lot of people. And so if you've got 20% at least of the population whose brains work in a different way,
yeah,
then there is going to need to be a societal shift
yeah,
in education, in work, in support, mental health services.
yeah,
Because I know from experience that from the men's mental health charity that I've worked with, there is a large group of men, or a large percentage of men who are part of that, who have neurodivergent issues that were only diagnosed as adults.
yeah,
And so these mental health issues have been created largely because they are a square peg trying to fit in a round hole.
yeah,
And if you can get these diagnoses early, and you look at the children, which I think is brilliant that there is more attention going on it now, and the fact that they look at family now as well, because it's inherited. It's not just something that, there you go, you're neurodivergent.
yeah,
And then explains why perhaps parents don't see any difference in their child.
yeah,
It's because it's normal to them.
yeah,
And so, there does have to be this big societal, your pendulum swing,
yeah,
that makes things more accessible. And if you do that, then you're going to improve the mental health of a large part of society, which in turn takes money
yeah.
that can be used for other things.
Yeah. And those labels, I just take your case for instance, if that, I see that, a lot of people say labels, we shouldn't use labels, but on the other side, that label that you have sort of collected, has been gifted, has enabled you. I see it as an enabler. You're sitting here talking about ADHD. It has been an enabler. And on the positive side of labels, all the good high skill levels with neurodivergence that I don't think are recognised anywhere near enough. The problem solving, the quick problem solving, and the entrepreneurship. Just as an example, I know there are many more. How do you bring that out? How do you bring that out in the education system? Take Richard Branson, for instance, who's famously said, he's dyslexic. He was terrible at school. I think he was chucked out of a couple of schools, if I recall correctly. But he had this entrepreneurship within him, this innate skill, and that's what I see that we need to pull out more of.
It's creativity.
Yeah.
It's the creative mind. And with the labels thing, getting a label helped me understand that, it's not just me.
Yeah.
It's not, I don't belong in an asylum somewhere. I'm not lazy. I'm not stupid.
Yeah.
And it helped me find other people who I could relate to or could relate to me. And there is something assuredly life-affirming when you're having a conversation with strangers saying, look, this is my experience, and this is an experience that I haven't told anybody else about for fear of judgment. And you go, look, these are the thoughts I have, or this has happened to me. And for them to go, yes, I've had something very similar to that, or I've had a lived experience that's very similar to yours, and they're not judging you, they're not saying you're stupid, there's none of those are unhelpful labels. And a label of neurodivergent or ADHD or ADD or autistic, I think, is an enabler. It enables you to find people who can relate to you, because there's nothing harder as a neurodivergent than trying to explain to a neurotypical person why you've been sat on the sofa for 8 hours scrolling on your phone, looking like you're being lazy or you're not bothered about what's going on, whatever. Whereas in actual fact, there's a disconnect between your brain and your body, and there is a conflict going on inside your brain that is not visible, but it is as awful as, I don't know, I can't even describe what it is like. That's the trouble is. But when you talk to another neurodivergent and say, look, I've just got this like paralysis, I go, yeah, absolutely, I get it.
It was like what you said earlier in the car.
Car chat, coming soon.
Quite a little treasure trove that is, isn't it, Carl? About you feeling you'd spent decades of your life feeling you were on pause, and that it could be seen as life wasted or sitting around. but and I said from a spiritual point of view, that's what a lot of teachings say, is to be witness, to see things, to stand back and take a wider perspective of drama, or the people's stuff, your stuff going on, to be witness, and that brings the self-awareness process and the growth and the wisdom. And I think that is, again, something that might be seen as, you beat yourself up or feel guilty about it, but actually it's a massive strength that later on in life, when you flip into, you may have got through a particular life lesson that's lasted decades, that life lesson trips over and you get it, then a whole new load of opportunities and experiences wake up. And you use a lot of that past to as an enabler. That's the word.
Enabler.
That's that word for today. As an enabler for what you do next.
And I think that's why it's important to get that label, because if I hadn't got that label of neurodivergent, I would still be sitting here in a depression, not knowing why I feel this way. And yeah, all those years that I felt like I have been on the sidelines watching the world go by, it would be very difficult to feel any sort of justification for it if I hadn't got this label or this diagnosis now. Because that's now enabled me to sit here with you and create a podcast. Now that was never on the horizon.
No. And connect with somebody else.
Absolutely,
Connect
yes, definitely. And possibly
one, two, more, or hundreds, thousands, millions, who knows? Likely one or two. But it's without that, this wouldn't happen.
No.
And I wouldn't be able to sit here and talk about these really difficult subjects with confidence. And yes, it is my own experience, but it is observations. And, the sadness, I think that's the thing, that when you do get diagnosed at a later stage in life, I almost feel like you do go through what they like the 7 stages of grief. Or, when somebody passes, and it's like, and it is grief for what's gone.
Anger,
a life loss, or absolute anger, denial. It's like it's unfair. Until you get to a point of eventually, hopefully, of acceptance. Now I'm perfectly happy that I'm neurodivergent. I'm okay with that, my brain works slightly differently to somebody else's, but it enables me to do, or to follow my gut more now, because it is like that affirmation that, my gut's right, and it is because that's the way my brain is connected.
This is me.
It is 100%, and I'm really proud of who I am now, which I could get a little bit tearful saying, because that is something that I never thought I would say. I hated who I was. I wished myself dead. I wished I'd never been born. I wish I could just disappear off the face of the earth so many times over the decades. And so to be able to sit here at this point, a couple of years away from 50, and say, do you know what? I'm really proud of who I am. I'm really proud of the family, the children that I've raised or I'm raising. I'm really proud of the relationship with my wife. I'm really proud of what we've achieved together. I'm really proud that I've survived all of the shit that was thrown at me over these decades. And no, life isn't perfect. Life will never be perfect. There will always be challenges, but as long as we approach them with that open-mindedness and willing to explore and do the hard work, then I don't think it's something to be scared of anymore. And I certainly think that linking in with the mental health side of things, getting to that place of acceptance that, there's something causing it. There is something causing it. You don't have to live a life of depression. You don't have to live a life of anxiety. And it's not just about taking medication. It might be getting the diagnosis that you need. It might be finding your tribe of people. It might be connecting. It might be reducing the isolation that you've inadvertently created around yourself and creating social connection. It doesn't have to be
one way. There isn't one answer. Medication absolutely 100% has a place. Absolutely. But it doesn't have to be the only. There are obviously some mental health conditions that are wholly reliant on it. And I'm not telling anybody to stop taking their medication. Absolutely not. You need that, you take that. But there's other things that can be done. And a big part of that is acceptance and self-exploration. And particularly for me, it was, I've got to stop pitying myself, because I'm not doing myself any favours. And it's that work that has really put me on the path to finding who I am. And that it is that discovery, which is going to be an onward journey. I think that's a lifetime thing.
It is.
It's not,
It's just, I've lived that chapter now.
Yeah.
And now I'm on to this new exciting chapter. And I'm really excited to see what that leads to.
Amen to that, I say.